Board on the computer. Okay, so today we're doing a rooster and we're going to start off with our charcoal drawing, our black and white version to study the tones and the shapes. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so I'll do that now. And I'm also going to mute all, if that's okay, just so that there's no background noise going on and you can hear me quite clearly. So I'll do that now. And continue. There we go. So that's good. I can't hear any background noise. If you wish to ask a question or anything like that during the class, then please do. Don't hesitate to do that, because I do enjoy getting questions. And if you've got a question, I'm sure someone else has too. So don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask away. I'm always very happy to do that. Okay. So there's my screen, and you should be able to see my table and paper and picture of my rooster. So what I'm looking at now is the black and white version, and we're just going to focus on that for now, and then we'll do the colour version next. So as I mentioned, you'll need some charcoal, and what I normally do is I draw up what I call a thumbnail of my picture in about the same dimensions. So I like to kind of put it in the middle of my page, and that's around about the right dimensions for this picture. That's the square or the rectangle that the rooster is in. And then you can see on the picture that I've given you some grid marks. So the grid mark really is just to help you place your drawing, to figure out where lines cross over each other and where everything sits within your picture. And you can actually break it down into each little quarter and then just draw that section inside your grid mark, and then you can move into the next one. So when you do that, you can look at the picture and just sort of, look at it and go, okay, so that's interesting. The top right quarter is mostly unpainted, and all we have in there is the big, beautiful tail. So the tail starts at about halfway down in that quarter. So if I put my charcoal mark there at about halfway down in the quarter, and then the tail crosses over just inside the halfway mark as we go down into that second quarter. So based on those two lines, I can now roughly draw in the edge of the tail mark and where that sits. And when I come down into the bottom right quarter, I can do a similar thing. So I can figure out that the tail comes off the page at about there, and then down, and then down, and then it comes across about halfway down in this quarter where it sort of meets the body of the rooster. So I'm sort of getting a very loose idea of the shapes and where all the edges are sitting. Okay, and then following along on this line, so I can see based on this quarter here that the body of the rooster begins at about the halfway mark across in that quarter. So if I come up to there, then that's where that begins, and it bleeds off the edge. So we're painting all the way to the edge today. We haven't got a whole bird with legs and things. I just thought we'd put the body in there and fill the entire page. So that's basically the shape on this side. And another way to find that shape on the right-hand side there is to look at your negative space. So that would be the shape of the white area or the background area. So if you're having trouble getting the right shape looking at the rooster outline, you can flip it over in your mind and look at the white area and draw that in. That's negative space. Okay, so that's roughly about where the rooster sits, and I've got my white shape there. I'll just take this mark out because I went too wide there. Lovely. So when I come over onto the left-hand bottom quarter, you can see the negative space, or the white area of the rooster, is just in that bottom corner, and his belly or chest takes up pretty much the whole left-hand bottom quarter. So if you mark in the edges of him, go all the way to the edge where the chest hits the side of the page, and then down a little bit in more than that, then that's basically the chest line of him. And then we get up into the left-hand quarter, and that will be, I guess, the most detailed area, because we've got the head and the beak and the eye and all those bits and bobs. So I'm just going to look at where the beak comes to in relation to the grid mark. So it sits just about, it'll come to about that there. So don't be afraid to put marks on your paper with your charcoal. You can always rub them out. So there's no big deal. So the beak will come to about there, and then it'll come across, and then that thing on the head starts about there. And just lightly drawing in the area that will take up, and then the head will come down. And so the back of the head will come down, and it'll meet the line that we just drew in the bottom left quarter. So quick little drawing lesson as well here. And then just drawing in the bottom section of the beak and the chest area and the face, and then where the eye will sit. So I'm not going to get too into the detail at this stage. This is just really to look at the shapes, study where they sit within the page and within relation to your grid line, and then getting everything drawn in so that you've got everything in the right place. So when you break it down into shapes like this and have really simple lines, it's quite simple, isn't it? It kind of simplifies everything, and you can just then focus on the light and the dark. So what we've done is get the basic shapes in there, and now we can start to look at where it's lightest and where it's darkest, and that's your tones. So your tones go from, really black all the way through to light, and then everything in between. So it's all about the shading and how dark each shade goes before you get to the really dark ones. So it's about learning how much colour to put down. It's also about learning to look at colour and determining what tone each one is. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So it's like from light to dark. That one should be a bit lighter. So if you want something a bit lighter in charcoal, just put your fingers in it, dab it, and it'll lift off a little bit. So not a very good example, but that's what I'm talking about, is your range of tone from dark to light. So let's look at this guy and have a look at where all the darkest parts are. So, and just start to shade some of that in. You might want to use a shorter, fatter piece of charcoal if you want to lie it on its side, and just use it a little piece so that you cover more area. I'm just going to stick with this piece for now, and what I'm going to do is just colour in or fill in where it's dark. So that's under the beak. What's that thing called that comes down under the beak there? I can't remember. Anyway, whatever that thing is. And then down into the chest. So it's lovely and dark in there. Don't worry about the detail. We're just looking at tone. Okay. So that's our darkest area. And then when you look at where the tail begins, so you can see the body comes across here. I'm just doing little light marks where those lighter feathers are. And then where the tail begins, you can actually go darker in there. So right in there, it gets quite dark, doesn't it? And then down out onto the edges of the tail. And then we've got some darker feathers on the end there. So those little ones that come down the bottom there. And then there's a little light patch or white feathers halfway along the tail. And then up towards the back of it, we've got more dark again. And the other thing to notice while you're doing this and studying it is the direction of everything. So if you look at the direction of each of those feathers and see which way they're kind of falling or facing, try to do your marks in the same direction as the thing that you're drawing or painting. That'll really help to get those the reality of it and to illustrate you know, how it feels, because it's all about texture, isn't it? So just filling in all those lovely dark bits. And then where we've got lighter feathers, so on the right hand side of the neck there, between the neck and the back that we've just done, there's these lighter feathers that sort of come across there. What I'm going to do is just put my fingers into there and lighten that off or smudge it in a bit. And so that makes that dark grey a bit lighter. And then I can come back in and put some darker marks through there, because those little light feathers kind of sit on top of the dark ones, don't they? So we've got this lovely darkness underneath those ones. And they wrap around there and have a lovely line. Now I'm going to show you a way to take your charcoal off your paper if you want to lighten some areas up. So this is a kneadable eraser. It's a well-used one and very dirty, but these are great for getting charcoal off. So if you want to get your light or your white back into your page, you can just reshape an edge. You can get a nice sharp knife blade type edge on it, and then just use it like you would a brush or a pencil. And each time you do that and lift charcoal off with it, you'll have to re-knead it to find a clean edge again. But you can actually use that to get some white into your charcoal picture, and it'll take it off the paper quite easily. So it's all about the pressure you apply and the shape of the edge that you get. But if you do it once and then do it again, you'll find it won't work as well, because what's happening is the eraser is picking up the charcoal off your paper. And if you keep the same edge and put it down, you're literally just putting it back on or just smudging it around. So it's not actually removing it anymore, because it's got the charcoal there. So you've got to keep finding a new edge with it. But these erasers are awesome for that. They're really good at letting you get the whites back into your charcoal. So you can get quite a lot of nice detail by doing that. And I'm just going to push some of this in here. So you can see on the left-hand side of the chest where it's dark, there's a little bit of light. And this paper's weird. It's putting strange shapes in there, but weirdly enough, they look like feathers. So it's kind of cool. So again, down in here on the chest, on the left-hand side, I can see there's some reflection or light or something in there. And again, I can use my eraser and just kind of flick it a little bit, do these little flicky marks and get those beautiful feathery edges. So have a little practice at doing that, because those marks are the sorts of gestures or marks that we'll be doing with pastels to get some feathery effects going on in there afterwards. And then I can just come back in and I can darken it all up if I want to make it darker in a couple of spots. You can see there's a little light bit there on the bottom. I think that's the wing or the edge of it. So I can again use my eraser and get some of that out. So it's amazing what you can do with a bit of charcoal, and it's a really good exercise to do this before you start any kind of artwork, because it's just a little practice run, and it means that you get to rehearse what you're painting. You also get to be familiar with the shapes and the tones. And tone is what's really important in any art, because it gives your art drama. So you want to make sure, well, I do anyway, I like to make sure that I've got plenty of light, well, not plenty of light, but you've got a really light colour and a really dark colour, so that you get that lovely contrast of tone. I'm just lightly drawing in some of these feathery marks here. So again, this is a good time to practice those. And I'm using the end of my charcoal stick, a bit like I would a pencil, to get a thinner mark and get those lovely feathery, soft lines in there. So just drawing those in one at a time, softly, softly, and varying the direction that they're going in, even though they're all going down basically. But just try to keep your mark or your hand loose and to get some variation in the direction that the feathers are hitting the page and coming down. So getting all those ones in at the back of the head there, making sure the shape of that is right too. It's got a lovely arc on it, hasn't it? And it comes down the side of the neck into that chest area. All right. So now we've got that bit done, we can start to kind of look at the head and look at the shapes and tones in there. So up around the eye, we've got a darker tone, and then there's skin around the eye that's a little bit lighter, and then you've got the eye itself in the middle. So if you've got a chunky bit of charcoal and a small bit of paper, it's going to be a bit harder to get in there, but don't stress, just kind of press lightly and see how you go. And sometimes it just works out, and if not, don't stress. It's really just part of studying a picture. You just want to look at the tones and make sure you get it darker around the outside, and then a little bit lighter, and then a little bit darker in the eye. And then we've got, I don't know if that's what that is. I think is that the ear, the little round thingy next to the eye? And then there's that white area there. So that's really white. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is take some of the charcoal out of there with my eraser again. Just wanted to lighten that bit up because it's quite bright, isn't it? So that little ear or cheeky bit there is kind of round, and then we've got the white section, and then we come down into that other bit that sits below the beak. I'm not very good at body parts, obviously. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they're called. We've just got to figure out their shapes and their tones. And so that looks, to me, it looks like an ear almost, doesn't it? The curve inside that. And we've got the lovely shadow in there. So just make that a little darker inside and dab it around with your finger just to try and get that texture. Cool. Darken that off in there. So don't be afraid to go really dark with your charcoal. You can press quite hard and make it nice and black. And if you use the very edge of your stick, you can get a really nice sharp hard mark. Okay. Might whiten up that white bit even more. Okay. And then up into the beak. So the beak sits fairly high. I'm going to remove that mark I popped in before because that was just a marker of where the beak went to within that quarter of the page. So I can take that out now and then mark in the beak. So it's quite pointy, and you can see there's a shadow on the top of the beak and it's lighter underneath. So if you darken off the top and then leave the bottom section fairly light, and then come around and begin with the crest. And again, we've got a really dark section where the beak and the crest meet, just above the nose there. And then it goes off into a mid-tone, which is your red. But in the grey, black and white picture, it's a mid-grey. So that's our rooster. And how many spikes are on that thing? There's a short one, and then another short one, and then a tall one, and a tall one. So there's 3 tall ones, and then we come to the big oval thing at the end. I'm not very good at describing these things. Anyway, that doesn't matter. So that's him. And then he's got a little tiny shine on his eye. So I don't know if you want to try and get that in there. I'm going to have a crack at lightening up around the eye a little bit more with my eraser, just so that the dark area is darker. So sometimes if you want to lighten something, you just look at what's around it, and sometimes it's easier to go darker rather than trying to get lighter. So it's always about contrast. Okay, and then I'm going to try and put a little shine in the eye. This is not a proper eye, it's just a dot. But as I said, we're not going to get too involved in the detail because we've got more fun things to do with the colour. So I just made a little point on my eraser and I just dabbed it on there, and it's given it just enough of a shine to say that, you know, that will do. That will do. And so once you've got to this point, then you just want to check your drawing. You want to check your grid lines again. Make sure that it's all in the right spot, that you haven't come over too wide anywhere or too narrow. You might want to make some feathers a little bit more wispy around the edges. Just looking at your shapes and the direction of things. Today's class will be mostly about being loose with our pastels, so we're not going to get into too much blending, if any. We might, you know, dab a few things here and there with your fingers, but essentially we're going to be trying to keep our pastels quite loose and not push it in so much. And so that will give us more of a drawing outcome, I guess. Pastels are an interesting medium. They've been around forever. And they actually last longer than anything else because they're pure pigment. And what was I going to say? Last longer, pure pigment. Oh, that's right. There's often a lot of discussion about whether pastel art is drawing or painting. So in the past, it's always been called drawing. And if you enter anything into an exhibition, that usually goes into the drawing category rather than the painting category. So, and the reason for that is because they're sticks. So they're sticks of pigment. There's no medium to use. It's basically just a dry pigment, which is probably what you would assume you would draw with, much like charcoal. Charcoal would be considered drawing as well. But there's debate about whether it is painting or drawing, and I think it could be both. Just depends on the technique and the artist and the way that it's applied. So you can make something look, you know, like a drawing with loose marks, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Or you can really blend it and push it around and make it look almost like an oil painting. So it's really up to the person using them and what style they prefer and how they like to work. So I like to do both, but I do love blending them. I love pushing the pastel around on the paper and creating new colours and just seeing what I can do. So if everyone is ready to move on, we'll get started on the colour version. I hope I didn't go too quickly. And as I said earlier, don't be afraid to, you know, speak up if you feel like you're having trouble and need some help or whatever. Just unmute yourself and speak up, because this is you know, a group thing, and I really do value how you're feeling and what you want to know. So that's cool. And often there's someone in the group who might know something that I don't, because I don't know everything. All right, so now we've done that bit, what I'm going to do is start talking about colours for the colour version. We'll choose some colours and talk about paper and get everything ready to go. Then we're going to have a little 10-minute break just to, you know, get back into gear, and then we'll get stuck into doing the pastels. Okay, awesome. So first thing I want to talk about is colour and the paper colour. So I think I said in my notes that black paper would be an awesome choice. And the reason I suggested black is because the colour of the rooster is going to stand out really beautifully on the black, because we're using beautiful brights. And so the black paper will form the background basically, because we're not going to fill it in today. And it'll keep it really sharp and lovely. The other good thing about black paper is that you can actually put black pastel on to kind of patch things up and clear things up. Who's got a question?
Jeanne, if you haven't got black, we can use a dark blue or a grey.
Yes, perfect. Yep, so anything like this is a blue, you could use a dark blue, a maroon. What else have I got in here? Yeah, or a mid-grey. This aubergine is a really nice colour. It's a purpley kind of colour. So anything that's dark will work really nicely with this. If you don't have dark paper, then just use whatever you have and don't stress. If you feel like you want to put a dark background in there, you can always fill the whole thing in. So if you have a light coloured paper and you want black or a dark background, just fill it in with pastel. Or if you have watercolour paint or even acrylic paint, you can always paint your paper first and then put your pastel over the top. So that's another great way of making your background. So there's lots of options and no limits. It's kind of cool.
So that's another tip we didn't know about.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I think I showed you how you could reuse your paper, didn't I?
Yes, you told us about it.
Yeah, so you can actually wash it in with a paintbrush and some water. So, for instance, if you don't like today's painting and you've done it on this lovely colour fixed paper and you don't want to waste the paper, you can literally just get a paintbrush and water and brush it all in and smudge it all in, and then you'll end up with a lovely background for a new painting. So you know, your paper's never wasted. I've got a pile of them over there that I've got to do that too, so I can reuse them. So don't feel like you can't use the good paper for classes or practice, because you can reuse it. Wonderful stuff. Okay, so now I've got some colours to look at, and I've already pre-selected some based on what I can see in the Rooster. So I can see, and what I wanted to do was make sure that I got these in some sort of order of tone, because tone is what's going to make this pop on the black, and that some of the black feathers will kind of bleed off into the background a little bit, but that's cool because then we can put a few highlights in and you'll get some nice soft edges. So I've chosen a black pastel. I don't normally work with too much black, but we've got a lot of black in there today, and that's going to be lovely to get some of the darks in through those feathers. I've got a dark green as well. I can see quite a lot of dark green up in those back feathers in the tail there. So I thought a dark green would be lovely. And if you ever want to test your paper, so for instance, you might want to try colours without doing it on your sheet. So you can always grab a piece of spare paper. So this is just like the colour wheel that we did the other day. So I'm just going to use the back. This is a different kind of paper, but even so, I can still practice on there with my colours and put them down and push them around and see how they play together. And see that dark green and this turquoise is beautiful in there, and I can see that in those feathers there at the back. It's just going to glow. It's going to be gorgeous.
Excuse me, Jeanne.
Yes.
I was just wondering, like, I've got some Rembrandts and some Senneliers. Is there a better one to use for this, or to mix them up? Or
mix them up, yeah. You can
mix them up?
either, yeah. Your Rembrandts are a little bit harder, so they'll be quite good for this.
Because, oh, okay.
Yeah, because we're going to be blending. So your harder pastels are good for doing the drawing kind of effects. So,
okay, so I'd be better off using those today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you've got a colour in the others that you haven't got in that set, by all means, just, you know, pick it up. I've got all mine mixed in together. I don't know what I've got anymore.
Oh.
That's why they're all different.
Okay.
That's okay. That's why these are all different shapes. So this one's a unison, which is a very popular one. It's filthy dirty, but that's a dark green. It's a little round one. This is a Art Spectrum Extra Soft. They come in the squares, so they're lovely, and so is that. So that's my terracotta orange colour that I'm going to use, which is really nice, and that kind of fits in with the chicken rooster. And the other ones here, I think, are probably, that looks like a Faber-Castell. So Faber-Castell are like little square-shaped sticks. It's purple. It's just got other colours all over it. And so that's a bit harder. So that'll be good for doing, you know, lines and marks and things. So the harder ones are quite good for this kind of work. I've got a blue, beautiful ultramarine blue. That's going to be lovely with my purples and my greens. Yeah. I've also got a darker blue. I don't know whether I will use that. I might. But again, you can just test that on your paper and see how that looks with your colours. And I've got red for the head. Oh, just broke it. They break really easily, so that's a beautiful red, isn't it? It's a lovely red. So that's the other bit there. And then I grabbed yellow because I can see yellow in the highlights with those orange feathers there. So I can see that going. Can you see how all these colours just look awesome on black? They really, really pop on the black paper. And because they're so bright and vibrant and beautiful. This is such a fun class because you get to play with lots of bright colours. That's my favourite thing in the world. And I also got a bit of white. So white will go up there on the face and a little bit in those back feathers as well. So it's always good to have a little bit of white somewhere. So basically these colours are what are going to be in my palette, and I think that's going to be quite nice. And if you want to test how they look, you know, when you blend them together, do that too. You can get some beautiful combinations when you push the colours around. So that's the funnest part, I reckon. Love it. So that's my little colour palette. What I'm going to do now is, actually I'm going to tape my paper down onto my board because then it'll be ready to go. So the other thing I like to do is use a little drawing board. And this is my one that I use for classes here. It's very grubby. It's well used and loved. It's just a bit of ply or something. So what's nice about that is I'm going to tape this onto my board, which means it's then stuck to my board and I can tip it up onto my little hand towel here and take all the dust off my paper, because as you work with pastels, you'll gather a lot of dust on your paper, especially if you're working flat and not on an easel. And so I just tip it off rather than trying to blow it off, because if you do that, you'll end up with pastel everywhere. So you're welcome to tape your paper all the way around the edge if you like. I'm just going to tape my corners down. I find that's enough when I'm working flat. If I'm on an easel, I'll usually put tape all around the whole page so that it just stays still and flat. And that way you don't have to hold it down. You've got a free hand, which is nice, and it's not going to move around. So that's basically all I do, and that's now going to sit on there without me having to hold it or move it. So that's my paper ready to go on my board, and then my palette of colours. So I'm going to leave that there for now. We'll have a 10-minute break if that's okay, and we'll come back. So it's 1:40, so we'll come back at 1:50 and we'll get stuck into all the colours. We'll draw this up and then we'll go for it. So I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes or so. Okay, cool. Okay, I'm back 1 minute early. So I just saw someone popped out, but you're back in again now. So hopefully everybody's here. The first thing I'm going to do, if you're ready, is to rule up our page. So what I'm using is a white pastel pencil. Probably wiser to use something a little bit more mid-tone. So I'll change that over to my mid-tone pinky coloured one. And the reason I'm using that is because it's not going to be too bright on my white paper, and it'll be a bit easier to get off later on if I don't want to have any marks on there.
So a mid-tone pastel pencil is a good one to have for when you're drawing up anything, especially on dark or light paper. It doesn't work so well on the mid-tone paper, obviously, because it's more colour and it's harder to see. And that's when you would use either a lighter or darker pencil. But the pencils are good for doing your fine work. They're really nice for doing things like hair and eyelashes and, you know, smaller, finer things rather than big, chunky things, because your pastels make a chunkier mark. First thing we always do is grid up the page. So depending on how much detail is in the picture, will depend on how much of a grid I'd like to use. In this instance, it's a fairly basic shape, so I'm not going to grid that up anymore. Technically, you could put more lines on there and, you know, get more precise with where you put everything when you're drawing it. But I think we've got enough information there today to just do it with the basic halfway marks. So let's draw this up again, and we've already done it once. So that's the good thing about doing the rehearsal in the beginning with the charcoals, because we get to process this a second time, and practice always helps, doesn't it? So let's start that again. I'm going to begin up here halfway down on my top right hand quarter, so that's about where the tail comes in, and then it slopes down, and just press lightly. You don't need to press very hard. We're just giving ourselves a little guide at the moment. So this isn't the final marking or anything, it's just a guide of where to put our pastel. So based on the grid, you can see where things cross over and where they how far away they sit from the lines, etc. And so I can see the bottom of the rooster's, I'm going to call that a gill thing, is about 2/3 down in this top quarter, so it comes to about there, I reckon, about there. And so then I can work on that area and just lightly draw in that red section and the neck area. Get the angle of the neck right, because it comes down like that, doesn't it, in front of the tail. Cross there a bit more. So just keep your hand loose and don't hold your pencil too tight. I find that's the best thing, is just keep it loose, hold it loose at the end like this, so that you haven't got a really tight grip. That way you'll be a little bit more relaxed when you're doing your drawing. Need to come over a bit more. So I'm just measuring the distance between the top of this red section and how far into the grid mark that comes. So it's about that far, and then the beak comes in a bit
Jeanne,
further.
I don't know about everybody else, but I'm having trouble seeing that.
Are you? Okay, I'll go white then. I'll use my white pencil so you can see what I'm doing.
Thank
That doesn't
you.
mean you. No worries. Thank you for telling me. Okay. I'm just putting the marks in there. Is that easier? I'm going to assume that it is.
Yes, thank you.
Last week. Yeah, cool. Lovely. All right, good. So I'm just marking in the edges of everything and getting all my shapes in the right place. So just, and how far across into this quarter does the crown of that red section come in? Comes all the way to there. Sometimes you think, how does it go all the way over there? I'm sure it's not that long or that wide, but you've just got to trust the grid, trust the lines and the measurements, because usually it's right because it's a mathematical thing. And sometimes our eye is not right, even though we think it is, it often isn't. I'm just pulling that line all the way down there, and you can see where the chest runs off the edge of the page, and then we've got this lovely, remember the negative space on the bottom left here. Okay, and then on the other side we've got negative space over there too. So remember we talked about the shape of that. And so if I'm going to look at the white space rather than the shape of the chicken or the chicken's wings, I can literally just draw that in like that. And I know that that comes to about halfway across that quarter and down through there and down like that. So that's roughly a shape that we can now start to fill in, because that's pretty much all we need to get down to start with, isn't it? If you want to put more detail in, you might want to put some of the feather marks in, for instance. That's where the white feather mark is, and we've got more white there. So you can start to kind of just look at everything like a shape and block in all the different shapes. So, you know, every little bit helps. There's a little negative space up here too, just off the tail. So see, we've got that top little feather, and then there's a V shape. So that's that bit there. It's the V. And again, you know, you can do the line of the beak. You can put the eye in. So figure out where the eye sits in relation to the beak, and your grid mark, and the width of the head. So it's about there-ish. And then I've got another round bit like that. No, it's too hot, I think. Yep. And then when you muck it up, you can just take it off with your kneadable eraser. And often dabbing it will give you a better outcome than rubbing it, depending on how much pastel you've got down already. So you can see there it hasn't removed it all, and I could keep working and get it all off. But that's why it's good not to go too heavy when you're just doing a temporary line or a bit of a guide, because if you press really hard, what happens is this paper especially has, you know, like a gritty sandpapery effect, and it has tooth in it. So that what happens is the pigment goes down inside the tooth, and it's harder to get off if you want to remove it. So that's why I always try to press pretty light when I'm doing my drawing. And then when I'm more sure of where everything is, as I progress through my drawing or painting, then I'll get a little bit heavier with my marks so that they do stick to the paper. So I've basically just drawn, you know, the edges of the shapes that I can see in here. So that's the little white cheek thingy. And then we've got a little round section there above it. My eye is there, and it's got that red shape around it, and that comes to the beak. So everything's relative. You've got to kind of look at distances between things and look at, you know, how low is this compared to the beak, how far into that quarter does it go, and where does it, what's the shape of it, what's the angle of that when it comes around onto the face. So don't worry about feathers and stuff yet. That's the fun part. We'll do that in a minute. So we just need to get the outline in there. Awesome. And always have your picture nearby, so you can see it. I'm just going to mute myself for a moment. Won't be a minute. Rightio. So if you want me to wait, I can. Otherwise, we can jump in and start putting some colour on here. Oh, great. As I said earlier, please speak up if you have questions or anything. Don't hesitate to interrupt. I like that. It's good. As well as my picture here on my page, on my paper, I've got an iPad propped up next to me or in front of me, so I can see the picture on the iPad as well. And that's really handy because you can zoom in if you want to. So if you want to see more detail on something, and sometimes a computer printout, especially on your home printer like mine, isn't really great for detail. I can see enough, and I've actually worked off this kind of print for years now. But yeah, the iPad is great, even a phone if you want to pop the image on there. So that's why I send through the image as a separate JPEG so that you can do that if you want to. Otherwise, you can just refer to your notes, so whatever works. But it's nice to have options, isn't it? So what we're going to do now is start at the back. So I like to always start behind or at the back of something when I'm painting it, because that way it's a lot easier to work forward and put things on top of other things rather than trying to get in behind things later on. So for instance, if I was putting, you know, sky and trees and stuff into a painting, I'd want to put the sky in first and put the trees on top rather than try and get the sky in around the trees afterwards. You can always touch things up and get back in behind later on if you want to, but I like to get the basics of things down first so that I don't have to try and work around stuff. So we're going to start with the back end of the tail there, and there's some really beautiful blues and greens in that section there. So let's pick up, what are we going to start with? Let's go with this beautiful ultramarine blue. And what I'm going to do is just lie it down on my page. So I like to keep my pastels on my page a little bit flat like that. What we want to do first up is get a little bit of foundation onto the paper. So I want to get a little bit of colour on there and then kind of start to sketch over it and build up the layers, because these are feathers and they're all kind of layered, aren't they? We're also going to, if you've got black paper, leave some of your black kind of undone and just press quite lightly. You don't have to press very hard to get a lot of colour down onto your paper. And notice the direction of the things in here. So you can see that there's feathers, there's one, they all kind of grow in the same direction, don't they? And then you've got one overlapping here in the front, one of those dark ones. So I just want to get some colour down first. And I'm literally just wiping my pastel over the paper there. By using the side of it, I'm actually getting more colour down. So it's covering the paper a lot faster. Okay. So to do the drawing and to keep layering, what we then need to do is pick up your dark green. I better wipe that off or I'll end up with white everywhere. And then I'm going to just put a bit of dark green in there as well. And just lightly, so I'm literally just drawing this on. Sorry, I've got a scratchy throat. Just drawing this on and kind of following the shape of the feathers. So I'm doing like just little lines using the end of the pastel and following the shape. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a vein through the middle of the feather. Quite light, actually. I don't want to put white in there. I feel like white might be too bright. So I'm going to go with this blue. This is my other blue. It's a little bit lighter. And I just want to mark in the center lines of the feather. I know that's a bit bright, but I'm going to quieten that down in a minute when I put more colour in. But those lines that I can see on the feathers there, that's a little bit too up and down, they will give us a guide as to the direction to move your pastels, if that makes sense. So just again, I'm just going to redo that now with the dark green, and I'm going to put more blue over this again. So don't stress if it's getting too dark or too, you know, boring or dull. We'll add other colour. Okay, and then before I go any further, I want to do this little one at the back here. So this little one here underneath is quite dark. So I'm going to use my black in there. So what that will do is kind of push it off into the paper a little bit and blend it off, but it'll also give me some depth so that the edge of this one on the top will kind of come forward a little bit more. that makes any sense at all. And while I've got black in my hand, I'm just going to touch up these other ones. Can you see the vein on this feather kind of is darker in the middle, and then as it comes out around the edges, you've got that lovely greeny colour. So what I'm doing is using my little black pastel, putting it down on the paper flat like that, and just starting at the vein, that's a little line that I just drew on before, and flicking it out. So I'm just pulling, smudging a little mark out from there, like that. And hopefully that's going to create a feathery look. So try to give it that textured feeling that it's kind of bulging out from that vein in the middle. Cool. And then we've got, so that dark patch in there, and there's another light one comes around. I'll pop a bit of black on there as well. This one goes in a different direction. It kind of comes across here. I'm doing this in black, but I'll put green on there in a minute. So let me put some brighter colour in there so you can see. So it comes across like that. So very, very quickly, it's already starting to look quite feathery, and we're getting all these beautiful blues and greens mixed together, which is the fun part, because as you put colour down on the paper, it picks up the colour underneath, whatever we've put down before, and kind of merges it with the other one. So we're kind of sort of blending, but not with fingers. We're just using the pastels themselves to push the colours around. Cool. So then this one across here has a little bit of light on it, doesn't it? There's a little bit of light just on the edge there. Can you see that? Don't be afraid to play with colour. So even if you see something that looks light, use another colour rather than white. So I'm keeping to the greens and the kinds of blue tones to lighten up this section here. There's obviously some light shining on the edge of that one. See how using just a lighter tone of my turquoise just brings that forward, it makes it pop. Okay. And then underneath that one, we've got another dark feather. So it's kind of going from dark to light, dark to light. If it's behind or underneath, it's going to be darker. And then as it comes out into light, you can see it more. So then it's going to shine. So we're just literally putting colour down on here, not pushing it in at all. Keep it nice and pure and clean. The minute you start to blend and push it in with your fingers is when it gets really muddy. And oftentimes that's an awesome thing to do. But in this instance, we want to keep the colours nice and bright. So try to keep your marks pure and not get your fingers in there. I always say that and then I end up putting them in anyway. So again, I've just, you see that little bit of light on this feather here at the back. It's a white light in the picture, but what I want to do is just make it into a nice turquoise, because I want the colours to be rich and yummy. As soon as you put white onto something, it kind of mutes it and makes it opaque, but it takes the brightness out sometimes. So I try not to use too much white. I find that it kind of, yeah, dulls things down sometimes. So in the process of doing this, I'm gathering quite a lot of dust on my paper, and you might be doing the same thing. So now's the time to just pick up that little board and bang it or tip it off onto your paper towel or whatever you've got beside you, or even on your tablecloth. I just take it outside afterwards, give it a shake, and then you can pop it into the washing machine, or if you don't want to put it in there, you can just hand wash it and give it a clean. It comes off pretty easily. I've just picked up purple because I can see there's a bit of purple in here. Remember we talked about purple before. Purples with these greens are just divine. So don't be afraid to try other colours, like, you know, mix it up a little bit. If a colour excites and delights you, then why not? This is your painting, so you get to do whatever you like with it. And really, what I've done is just break this down into shapes and colours. And hopefully they'll sort of look like feathers towards the end. Okay. We've got a little bit of orange and brown going on back there as well. So I'm going to pop a bit of that in. That bottom feather there on the tail that's kind of bleeding off the page a bit, it has a bit of brown or an orange in it. So I'm going to put that down there. And then I'm just going to make this one a bit bigger because it needs to bleed over the top of it. So you can just kind of work your way around it with bits and pieces. And rather than using white on the orange section, you can see there's quite a light section there. I'm just going to use my yellow and see what that looks like. There we go. And I've just got black in my hand again. So what I'm doing with that is just getting a bit more of the detail into the feathers, because I can see, you see the little ridges in there. So where the feathers kind of come out from the center vein, they've got these little dark ridges, a bit like a leaf really, a bit like the veins on a leaf. So I'm just using my black pastel to illustrate some of those veins and just drawing a few little lines in here and there. What that does is it makes it look like it's got more texture, and also kind of, because it's the same color as the paper, it's all blending in nicely and letting some of that dark underneath come through again. So just kind of, yeah, looking at the smaller details, I guess, and not really getting too fiddly with the detail, but making sure that you get enough tone. That's the thing. It's the tones, the darks and the lights that make things pop. Okay, so that bit of orange and bright yellow is quite bright. I don't mind it though. I'm going to leave it there for now. If it looks a bit silly or odd or out of place later on, I can mute that down and I can add a bit of green or blue to quieten it down, but I'm going to leave it there for now because it might kind of work in really nicely with the other orange sections that we do when we add a few yellow highlights. So next thing we want to look at is the shape of these feathers back here. So we've got this white section here, and it's got what looks like a black feather with an orange tip on it, and then we've got all this black and orange coming through there. So just studying that little section of the tail feathers. And so what we want is the orange and the white, and probably black, and maybe a bit of purple, because I can see some shadows in there. And of course, purple is always beautiful for shadows. So let's pop a bit of orange. I can see orange back here at the beginning of the tail where it comes out from behind the body there. You see that little orange shape? It's like a triangular shape just right there. Doesn't matter if you bleed that over or you know, put a little bit of over into the neck line, because we're going to come in front of there anyway later on. So, and just saying that in this neckline, when we do come over the front, we can actually brighten that bit up there so that when we get in front of this orange section, this front area will be a little bit lighter, because if they're the same colour, you won't be able to tell which one's further away. The other way to darken the orange in the back off on the tail is just to pop a bit of purple in there. So can you see the texture? The purple and orange are really nice to get a little bit of texture and make it look like feathers. Lovely. All right, and now I'm going to do that black feather in between the white ones first. The reason I want to do that is because when I put the white on, I want to not have to go back in there with anything else and kind of contaminate it. So if I put the black in here, and I know my paper's already black, so I could have left it, but I just want to put a little bit of black pastel there. And it kind of comes down through there. Make sure you give your hands a wipe in between your darks and lights, because if I pick up my white and I've got black all over my fingers, it's going to make it grey. So always have a little hand towel nearby with one end wet, and that's going to help you keep your fingers nice and clean. I've come in, now I've got my white. So there's my black. It's laid down. I better put the vein in there. I might use the orange to do that because I don't want it to be super bright. And it's also got orange on the end. So I'm going to come around like that with some orange. So that's sort of the end of that feather. And now I'm going to pick up the white. So I want to keep my white as pure as I can on here. I don't want it to kind of get muddied up with other colours. So what I'm going to do is draw with it. And if you have a white pencil, you might be happier to use that. But this is just a short, stumpy bit of white, and I'm just using the edge. So to get a fine line or a sharp line, just use the edge of your pastel. You'll find some sharp edges usually. If you can't, you might need to break it again to get a nice crispy edge if it's not been broken before. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing pretty hard, and what I want to do is just get this white to sit on the top. See, and if I keep, I'm not going to get my fingers into this or anything else much, because I don't want to make it dirty. So that's the only downfall with pastels, is they pick up colour from each other and they get quite contaminated, or dirty. Dirty is a better word. Contaminated sounds really yucky. So that's my white section in there. I've got lots of crumbs and dust, but that's okay. I can tip that off in a minute. I'm going to put my little white, there's a little white fluffy bit in there. And then there's another one just there. Now, the thing is, if we do mess this up and get other colours mixed into it accidentally, you can always come back over and put some more white down. So don't stress, you know, it's not like you can't come back and do that again. But I do like to try and keep it pure. And when there's no other colours underneath it, then that's good, because it's got nothing underneath it to muck it up or mess it up or make it dirty. I'm just picking up my white and black again, and I just want to get that little shape back in there. Okay, and a little black feather down there. So that's my white section. If you wanted to tip off your dust and put more on, you could do that. And you'll find when you tip your dust off, it kind of catches on the paper. So can you see all the white across here? Because when I tipped it off, it kind of caught on all the texture of the paper across here. Now, if that's a problem and you want to get it off, for instance, this area here is my black background that I want to keep black, and it's now got all this white dust on there, you can just get your kneadable eraser and dab it off. So try not to rub it, because that'll kind of push it in a bit more, but just try to dab it and find a clean side, and that should pick it up off your paper and keep it fairly clean. I'm not worried about this section because I'm going to put colour and stuff in there anyway, so I'll leave it there for now. But that's what happens when you tip your dust off. It kind of falls down and catches on the other parts of your paper. All right, so now we want to work forward a little bit further. So we've got the orange and the blacks happening in there. What I'm going to do is just sweep some orange around and start to pull that down through here. Now, I know this feather here needs to be greener, more green than that. I can come back and sort that in a minute. So just, and pull your pastel in the direction the feathers grow. So if they're growing from the spine or the back of the tail there, then start there and come down. So you're almost making a fan shape, because that's the direction that these feathers are falling, isn't it? And it's important to do that, because every gesture or every mark that you do is going to give your body, your image texture and body. And so if you follow the direction of the thing, it'll be more realistic. I'm just going to green up that back feather there because didn't get enough green in there. Might add a bit of blue while I'm there. So this is so much fun, just pushing all these colours around together. And as I said before, if you don't get your fingers into it, they'll stay really clean and nice. So you can see where I've put the orange down, there's quite a lot of black paper showing through, and that's okay. It's just one layer, basically, of colour. And a similar thing's been happening up in the back feathers when we started. So you can see not necessarily the paper showing through, but the black that I put down afterwards. And so I'm going to do that again here. And same kind of deal. What I'm using though is the end of the pastel stick. So rather than using the side, because I don't want a wide mark now, I want a thinner mark, and I want to start pulling it from that center piece where it's all growing from out into the orange, so that we're getting that nice textured feathery look. Just pulling that down through there, and you can see it's going quite muddy because
Excuse
of the
me,
black.
Jeanine, is that black you're using there? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
It's black. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
Yeah, you could use blue violet instead if you don't want to use black. So anything dark, really. Yeah, I'm using black because I'm on black paper. And as I said, I don't usually use a lot of black. I don't like it too. I mean, I do love it. I love the drama of it, but usually for shadows and things like that, I'll go for blue violets and purple and save my black for really impactful things. But this has a lot of black in it today. So as you do that, you'll find that the black pastel is picking up the orange pastel, and they're kind of all running in together. But if you keep your lines sort of separate, try not to muddy it up too much, then you'll find they'll start to create a lovely texture. And then you can come back again with your orange. So what I'm noticing is that more orange sections, kind of the parts that are hanging off down into the bottom. So what we're doing is we're actually finding the light. So if you look at the picture of the rooster, you can see that some of the areas are brighter and they're kind of catching the light. And if you squint at the picture that you have, you can see where the light's coming from. And it's brighter. I'm just going to put some orange where I can see the light so you know what I'm talking about. You don't have to do this bit. But there's light there. And there's light right on the edge of the neck there where I put yellow earlier. So that's definitely the light coming from above, I think. And possibly there's also some reflecting from underneath, because we can see that light on those feathers on the chest there. But yeah, they're the brightest sections, aren't they, where the light's really popping on the rooster. So we've got that beautiful orange in there. I feel like I want to add red now. So if you feel like you want to add another colour, go for it. Don't be afraid to pick up something else if it's calling you. The red's nice. That will tie it in with the rest of the chicken, rooster. And then, as I said earlier, if you want to put a bit of purple in there too, that's also going to give it some lovely shadow. So just use your pastels like pencils. They're drawing today. We're drawing, we're not blending. And we're just getting lots of lines down and building up the layers so that we're getting that beautiful texture on the feathers. You can just see the edges of that white patch that we just popped on there. I need to kind of feather that up a little bit around the edges. So I've just done a bit of purple markings in there, and then I'll just soften it off with a bit of orange as well. Once you put your orange and your red and your purple and things down, don't keep going over it, because if you do that, it'll start to blend and then it'll turn to mud again. So you kind of got to limit how much you put on, and just be very deliberate about what you put where, because there does come a time when your paper will fill up and you won't be able to get any more on. So just be sparing, I guess. I like to just put it on lightly, and then if you do that, you'll give yourself enough space to, you know, keep adding if you need to, and not fill the paper up too quickly. I'm just playing with colour now because, you know, I like it. And do whatever you like, and these colours are lovely. These beautiful blues and turquoise, such nice colours. So they're lots of fun to play with. I'm going to just pop a bit of, I think, a bit of blue into that black feather in the middle of the white section. It's sort of looking a bit sticking out too much. So I'm just going to soften that off with a bit of blue. Give it a bit more texture. There we go. So that's basically the tail, pretty much done. So just, you know, check it, keep kind of looking at it. If you are sick of looking at it and don't quite know what to do next, best thing to do is just close your eyes and then open them again, and you'll see it in a different light. Or next best thing to do actually is take a photo and look at the photo, and you'll get a really good idea of how you're going, because photos, I don't know, they just look different and give you a different perspective. Must be the colour or something, but they always seem to enhance everything, and they make you feel better about yourself if you're having any doubt. That's what I find anyway. So don't be afraid to take a photo, take progress shots. It's a great way to remember what you've done and record it. And you'll find if you do that and then you look back at it, it'll start to make more sense. So don't be afraid to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to move into the rest of the body. So down on the right-hand side, we've got these lovely orange feathers just down in here. And then we've got these beautiful dark ones that come over the top of that. So I'm going to put the orange bit in first. So then we can add the other dark ones. There's also a bit of like a reddy coloured feather thing happening just here. Oops, nearly picked up the wrong colour there. In there. So I've just wiped that with my red to get a bit of depth into it, and then I can start to do some more line work and build up the texture of that one again. I'm going to use purple to start to do that, because as I said earlier, purple's beautiful for shadows. Just putting some purple on there, gorgeous. These colours. And notice on that bottom orange section there, the feathers there, the back one is a little darker. So if you pop a bit of purple down there, that'll darken off the back orange feather, and then it'll kind of bring that other one forward. And if it doesn't quite, you can pop a bit more orange on there and just sharpen up that edge a little bit, just in there. All shapes and lines, isn't it? Okay. So once you've got that part done, I'm going to add some more black just into this little bit here, just to whiten that down a little bit, a tiny bit. So when I come back over the top with that yellow, the yellow feathers on the neckline, they're going to pop a little bit more on the black. And then start to fill in some of the black feathers down through the chest area, down through here. Okay. And then I'm going to go up into the neck. So before we do much more, I want to get some dark up in here under the neck, because we've got to put all that beautiful orange over the top of it. So I know it's a bit hard to see on the black paper. I'm going to add some blue to it just because I can, and it'll make it a little bit more interesting than boring black. And then when we put the orange over the top, that's going to kind of glow. I'll just have a try and see. Yeah, that'll be beautiful. Okay. So we just need to get a bit of dark in here so that we can put the orange over it and start to build up that lovely contrast. And then I'm going to keep going down into here with my blue. So as you come down into the chest, can you see that there's those feathery shapes there? They kind of all overlap each other. So we want to start to kind of mark the paper, or make the marks that emulate that. And so we'll find a pastel that's going to fit. Let me see if this works. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start with my blue, put some of that down first. Just rub some blue over here like we did at the start on the back feathers. Just get a bit of that colour down onto your paper, like that. Might add a bit of purple just for some shadow. And so you can see the front of the chest, bottom left side of the chest is lighter, isn't it? Because obviously there's a light bouncing off something that's reflecting off the feathers there. So I'm just thinking if I pop a little bit of maybe this, I'm just thinking in tone now. So this turquoise colour is a little bit lighter. It's lighter in tone if I squint. If I put turquoise and blue together like that and squint, then my turquoise is slightly lighter. So that's going to be my lighter tone over here on my chest, because the light's coming off there. And then as we move across, we'll use less of it because it's darker as it comes across, and then up into towards the neck. And now, if you've done that, I feel like everyone's catching up. I'm going to wait a second, if that's okay. Tip off some dust and things. Tell me if I'm going too quickly. Put a bit of blue in there.
Jeanne, could you just move the picture up a little bit, because we can't see your hand at the moment?
There?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't see quite the bottom of the rooster yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that might. Oh, actually, that'd be close, getting close to the bottom of him. Oh, that's worse. That's about
Where? There?
Yeah, nearly the bottom. Yeah, yeah. That's better than it was. Yeah. So we can.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry.
Sorry. I thought you could see what I could see, and I could see everything. So, yeah. Can you see him now?
It's fine on mine.
Is
Like
it?
it was fine on mine.
Oh, I wonder if it's because I'm on my iPad. I can see him now. He's fine. But just before, I couldn't see, like where you were working, I couldn't see where you were.
Oh.
So
Does it change if you flip it around? Like as in, are you going portrait or landscape?
Landscape.
Hmm. I can see it fine and I'm on landscape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good now. I can see what your hand's doing.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Good.
So,
Lovely. Lovely. All right. Thank you for that. Yeah. So yeah, if you are having trouble, let me know. I can zoom in and out and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things and move things around. So just let me know. Great. Okay, so I've got some of these beautiful blues and greens in here, and I told you I wouldn't blend, but I just have to a little bit. So what I want to do is kind of push all these colours together, because the feathers on the chest are quite smooth, and they feel, or they look quite, I don't know, silky, I guess. Try not to pull your orange down into your blue, because that'll just make mud. But what I want to do is just blend all of this in here, and then when I come back, I'm going to get my black pastel, and my black pastel's about the right size. What I'm trying to do is make those little feathery marks, I suppose, and so it's about the right width, and just do little kind of round movements like this with your black, little short, you know, and hopefully that will start to look a little bit like feathers. I don't want to put too much of the black down and lose that beautiful brightness, but we still need to try and get the texture in there. So just by pulling that around, a bit like if you had a paintbrush and you just did those flicky sort of soft movements. So now it's looking a little bit too like a pattern. So just to soften that off, I'm going to softly pull it around again. And what I'm doing now is I'm pulling my finger in the direction that the chest is growing or going in. So kind of pulling everything in towards the base of the rooster. And I think that looks all right. If you wanted to add some more highlights to there, then you could come in with this beautiful, you know, something like your light turquoisey colour to get a bit of light back in there, like that. See, that will then put the light right on the edge. My white outline is sticking out a bit too much right there, but see how by just adding a little bit of that colour there, it looks like the light's catching the edge of the chest and it's kind of glowing in that beautiful turquoise. I know it's exaggerated compared to the picture, but that's what artists do, isn't it? We kind of make it our own. So, and then sort of let it get darker as it curves around into the front of the chest. So this area here is quite dark on the picture, and then it gets lighter as it comes back around that way. So if that's light around there, then we can add a bit of this turquoise just on this edge here. See that little bit of light that's there on that dark feather? Didn't work quite so well there. Probably because it's not up against the dark edge. No, I'm going to make that blue again. So this is what you can do. It's lovely. You can just kind of go over things and make it how you want it to be. There we are. So I'm quite content with how that's looking now, with the feathers, and it's looking really bright, isn't it? It's lovely. So I'm just wiping my hand off with my cloth. So let's refocusing things. Let's get back up into this neck area. So what we want to do is start to get some of the oranges through there and on the other side, and they kind of come in and they kind of almost meet in the middle, don't they? So you've got these beautiful feathers that come around from basically one point on the side there and again on the neckline, and then we'll add some yellows and brighten that up. So I'm going to start at the head, just above the eye. We've got all that lovely, look, they look like really spiky feathers up there. So I'm just going to put some colour down there and start to kind of draw them in and follow the direction of the feathers in the picture. So I'm using the edge of the orange pastel as I would if it was a pencil. If you have pencils, that's awesome. You could use those. I quite like the wider mark that the pastel makes. Now, as I'm coming across just notice the direction that the feathers are going in. And so they're shorter just under the cheek there as they come across towards the center. And then they get a little bit longer and they come in, and then they kind of fan out to cover the rest of the neck area there. So it's all about the direction that they grow, and make sure that you put your mark down in that direction. Something like that. Then while you've got that in your hand, you can pop over to the other side. If you haven't done it already, I've already done a little bit of it, but you can then start to put the orange feathers in on that side as well. So they kind of come in and they meet, nearly meet in the middle, not quite. And that's why we needed to get that dark in first, so that then we can bring the orange feathers over the top and the dark's already there. Okay, and then these ones come down and then they kind of get shorter at the back there, just in front of the tail, like that. So that's telling us where the neck ends here, and then we've got the tail starting higher up and further back. And so we'll lighten up some of these sections with some yellow and get some really nice brights going on in there. First, I need to start like building this up a little bit more. I'm going to put some red in, because the red and the orange together are lovely, and that's just going to give it some more depth. So the same sort of thing again, it's just the same kind of motions with your pastel sticks, and I'll go over this again with orange afterwards. So we're starting to layer it and get it really nice and thick, because if you look at the feathers on the picture, they're super thick, aren't they? There's all layers over layers over layers. And so the ones that are further down, that sit, around the shoulder, what I think is the shoulder area, are longer. And then we've got shorter ones that come from out of the head. So we can start to really work on those and get those little shorter ones to sit on top of the others. Same on the other side. Just want to get a little bit of red in there. Might only put that on the inside, I think, because I want to brighten up that really light section where the yellow is going to be. Also, we need some shadows. So again, purple is lovely for getting some of the darker shadow sections in here. Same sort of thing, just pull it in the direction that the feathers are growing. And around the back of the head there, up around the eye. So around the eye, they're kind of short, prickly little feathers, aren't they? So do little short movements. It's all relative. And then you come down and do shorter movements that overlap those longer feathers underneath. And we'll be able to make that a bit more obvious in a second when we come back with the brighter or lighter colour. Cool. And then back in with orange again. So see how by layering everything like this, we're building it up lovely and thick. And all the colours are just singing together. It's just gorgeous. So as we build it up, we do shorter strokes that are coming from the top of the head down. So we've got all these like a shaggy haircut kind of thing happening through here. Yeah, nice. We'll pop yellow in a sec. We'll get the brights in a minute. And so it's all about the gesture, isn't it? It's about the direction that you pull your pastel and the mark that you make, how hard you press, and the direction that you pull it in. So you can see on the chest, we kind of pulled it around to get that beautiful rounded effect happening, and then lighting up that left side. So you've got all this lovely light bouncing off the chest there. And it feels like the feathers run in that direction. And then drawing in all the orange feathers here, it's kind of looser and, I don't know, more spiky, I guess. They feel a little bit more spiky to me. And so it's just doing those movements that indicate that. Okay, let's get some yellow into here. Can't wait too much longer. So I can see bright back here where the neck is in front of the tail. There's some beautiful brights just there, isn't it? So let's pop a bit of yellow in there. So this is instead of white. If we put white there, it would be nice, but it wouldn't glow like the yellow does. It would also kind of get a little bit lost with the white back here. So to make this warmer and glow, the yellow is a really nice option. It also tells me where the light's hitting it, so we can actually press a little harder in a couple of spots just to really brighten up that edge and get a nice shine happening. And again on the left hand side, so it's about the same height or as even with the yellow on the right. Probably not quite as bright on that very edge there, but still got enough light there just to give it some little highlights. And then you can put a few random ones in down through there. So that's nice. Is there anywhere else I can put yellow while it's in my hand? Not right now. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move up into the face and start working on that section. So this is where it gets a little bit more fiddly because there are smaller parts to do, like the eye and the beak and so forth. So if you do have pencils, you might want to use those. Otherwise, we're going to wing it with pastel. And I will too, because, it's nice to have a challenge. So I'm going to grab, not that the beak is white, but I want to put white down first, just so then I can put other colour over it and kind of mute it a little bit. So you just want a little bit of white. And the secret is not to go too big. So it's really easy to keep filling something with colour and then you end up making it twice the size it should be, because you just keep adding and adding, thinking, oh, the shape's not right. And it just gets bigger and bigger. So don't do that. Try to stay in the lines and keep it clean and simple. So don't put too much down because you'll get out of control. So just go lightly, just put a little bit down. And now I'm going to come in, I'm going to pop a bit of orange over it actually, because that'll make it an apricot kind of colour. And it is sort of, it's more, a skin kind of apricot colour than it is white. So I don't mind that colour actually, it's quite nice. So again, I just put a little bit of terracotta over the white. What that's done is it's kind of mixed with the white, but it's not too bright now. And it's kind of muted it down a little bit. So I'm actually going to leave that as it is. I'm not going to fiddle with it anymore, because if I do, I'm just going to end up with an enormous beak. So you've got a hard time trying to control yourself really, and not keep fixing something, because it gets ugly. Trust me. Now I've got a lot of dust on there. I'm just going to tip that off again. Crumbs everywhere. Try not to blow it because it does go all over the place. Okay. So can you see on the top of the beak, there's a bit of shadow. So it's quite dark in between the beak and the red crest thingy. So I'm going to use a bit of purple because that's what I like to use for shadows. And just go in at the top of the beak where it meets the crest and press pretty hard, depending on how hard your pastel is. This one for me is quite hard. It's like using a pencil. So I just want to get that a little bit darker in there. And I think I might have to add some black as well, just to make it a bit stronger. But the purple's nice for shadow. And then I can get a bit of black, just push that in there as well and darken that off a little bit more. So now we've got this nice bit of shadow sitting on top of the beak and in front of the the crest part. So let's put all the reds in. Here's my beautiful red, favourite colour. And I'm going to pop some of that in here. So again, same as with the beak. Don't go too much, just go lightly. Just fill in inside your lines basically, and try not to, you know, keep going, because you'll end up with an enormous crest that'll go off the page. So I find it's always best to go very carefully at first. And then once you've got everything where it needs to be, then you can focus on blending it in, or you know, adding more colour or being more precise with it. Okay, so just go really carefully. And if you've got white outline like I have from my pencil, I can take that off later, or go around it with black or something and just get rid of it. I am going to dab this a little bit, because what I want to do is push the pastel into the paper and just make it sort of hang on, I guess. Now you're going to find it almost, well, you will probably find it, unless you've got teeny weeny fingers, to get into the crest, into those pointy bits. So the secret there is to either just draw it in with the edge of your pastel. So this pastel's got a nice pointy edge on it. So I'm just going to draw that in and leave it there, and not try to get my fingers into it, because the minute I do that, it's just going to get messy and too big. So as I said, if you've got pencils, that's going to give you a more precise mark. And just notice the direction that these little spiky thingies going. You know, one's almost pointing straight up, and then the other two are slanting back a little bit. And then we've got those little short bumpy bits at the front. So that's probably enough on there. I'll just put a little bit of red into the shadow of the beak there at the top too, just to kind of bleed that down into the beak. And now we've got red around the eye, so we need to pop that in. That's that red section around there. And again, just go carefully. So try not to put, you know, go too wide or make it too big. Just go smaller if anything. You can always add more. Popping that in there. And then we've got this, the thingy under the beak. Fill that in as well. And then we'll use some black and blue, and maybe blue, yeah, to do the shadows and make all of the bits and pieces feel like they're real. So again, just go easy. Go gently, gently. I forgot about that little round ear thingy on the side there. So I'm going to put orange in there, because it's quite orange. And that will also need some shadow on it to make it look like it's 3D. And then just in here, this kind of red and orange in there. So it's all about looking at the colours and figuring out, what colour is that? What does that need to be? What can I add to make it more realistic, or closer to what it really is? So there's quite a bit of red in there. Everything's kind of red in all of that area, isn't it? So pop that in there. And then we can start to, I'm putting that white bit in last, because I want that to sit on the top. And I've left that section unpainted as much as I could, so that when I put the white down, there won't be anything underneath it to make it dirty. So that's my theory for that. But let's pop a bit of purple into some of the shadows within this red section. So I've got that funny little ear shape in here. So if you put a bit of dark, just where you can see a dark shadow, or purple, I mean, that's going to help to start making it feel like it's got that fold in it. Putting a little bit up in the above the eye as well. Put a bit of shadow around the inside of the eye too, so just in here. See how that little bit of purple just gives it that 3D feeling. And then I'm going to pop a bit of blue in and see what happens, because the blue is slightly darker than the purple, so that might give me a nice tone. Ooh, I love blue and red together, aren't they lovely? I'm just seeing, put a bit up in here too. So just now's the time to start looking at the detail and really looking at the shadows and the light, and you know where all the dark's coming from and so forth. Okay, just going to dab it in. So if you feel like you've got a lot of pastel on the surface and you want to push it in, just push it, but don't blend it. Just literally put your finger on and push, and then lift off again. And that will kind of let all the pigment get into the paper and create a little bit of a softness and a bit of shadow and more tone without blending it. If you blend it, it's going to just turn to, everything will go purple because we've got blue in there now. Okay. And so normally I would use a blue violet to get my shadows in there, and I probably should find one. I didn't put it in the palette, but blue violet is this color, and it looks nearly black, but it's got a beautiful purple base. So it's really lovely, lovely, lovely in the shadows. So if you have one of those, grab that. If you don't, then black will be fine. But you just want a little bit of black, not too much. I'm going to use my blue violet, and what I'm going to do is put it where I can see dark sections within the red areas. So there's a little dark line here coming from under the beak and down into that red thing. And then we've got some more dark inside that little fold in there. And so a bit of blue violet in there will just give it some more shadow and depth and drama. I like drama in my art. And then back in here, there's a little bit of dark in there. I'm trying not to get any dark where I want to put white later, because I don't want to contaminate anything. And then we've got a bit of dark just above the beak, between the beak and the eye. There's a little dark line there. So we can pop a bit of that in with either your black or your blue violet. And maybe put a bit of that across the top of the beak as well, where that shadow is. It just makes it a little bit more dramatic and stand out. Cool. And then, okay, now we've got to do the eye. This is going to be the fiddly bit. So what you want to do, the eye, if we look at that, it's orange with a black pupil, and then it's got a little black outline around it, hasn't it? So we want to make the eye orange first, and then we want to do the pupil and the outline. So I'm going to get my orange pastel. I'm going to try and find a sharp corner or an edge. If you have pencils, this will be perfect. But what I'm going to do is just try and draw an eye, an orange circle basically. We can put the black pupil in over the top, so don't stress about leaving that bit undone. We just want to get a nice orange circle in there. And yeah, usually the tip of a pastel or the edge will work. If you don't have a sharp tip on something like I've got on there, yeah, it's going to be a bit tricky. But it's all about learning how to manipulate them to do what you want to do and to make the marks you want to make. So it's all experience, isn't it? And just practicing. So I need to put a bit of black feather down there. All right. So if you've got your orange eye in there, I'm just going to dab it in, actually, just push it, because I want it to sort of stick to the paper a little bit, so I can then get a little dark outline around it. I'm going to cheat and use my pencil. So I've got a black pencil, and I'm just going to draw an outline around the eye. If you can only get a few pencils, just get yourself a black or white and a mid-tone like that pink skin colour one. And that should do you for most things that you need to get fine lines for. Okay, so that's the little outline around the eye. And hopefully what that will do is kind of give it some 3D dimension. And then I'm going to pop the pupil in there. So the pupil is actually quite big, isn't it, in comparison to the size of the eyeball. So you can't see a whole lot of the orange in there. And again, if you don't have a pencil, just try to use the edge of your pastel. It's tricky, I know. I think my wrist has just gone cross-eyed. But I'm going to resist the urge to keep fixing it because it'll just get bigger and bigger. So I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, and then we can pop the little white shine on there after. That's when you get the joy, because you get to put all the bright bits in. Okay, so next thing we want to do, if you're up to that part, is we want to put that white shape in there next to the face. So I've got my white pastel. I've tried to leave most of this without colour on it because I don't want it to get dirty. But if you did, it doesn't matter. Don't stress. And we're just going to put that in there. Again, I'm just using the very edge of my pastel to try and make sure I don't make it too fat or too big or anything like that. And just for fun, I can pop a bit of a white, a bit more white just on that beak to give it a bit more shine. That's nice. Once you've got your white down in that bit, just give it a little dab. Make sure you've got cleanish fingers. So I'm just dabbing that in. I can still see some of the paper through there, but I'm not too concerned about that. Don't mind. Okay. You might want to just touch up some of those orange feathers that you could have smudged, or if you want to put a few more short ones in now that you've got everything else in there. And there's a few little shiny bits just around the eye. I'm going to use my yellow to just lightly put those in and then dab them in a little bit so they're not too strong. So now's the time to start really looking at the picture and thinking, well, where else do I need to add light or dark, or do I need to sharpen anything up or define anything a bit more, soften something off, anything like that. So I'm just kind of letting my eyes wander around the picture, and I can see on that white bit in down there. So just going to pop a bit of that in. I don't want that to be too white. It's not something I want to draw attention to, so I want to keep it fairly muted. I'm not going to press too hard. So when you press lightly, you just make a very light mark and it's not too obvious. And there's a little ring mark over here on the right side that I missed as well. So see those little details you kind of don't see when you're doing it, and then when you step back, you think, oh, I forgot that bit. But it's good with pastels because you can literally just pop them in. And I can see a little bit of an orange glow just in a couple of spots on those chest feathers there. Might be a bit too much. If it is, just go over it with some black or blue. Quieten it down a little bit, because everything reflects everything. So if you've got, these dark feathers under here, they're going to be reflecting whatever colours around them. And so everything kind of ties in with each other. I'm just going to extend my feathers over here, my orange ones, because they should come around a little bit more. So just noticing those little things. I'm tidying up bits and pieces here and there. And around this white section next to the face, there's a little bit of dark underneath it. So I can use my black pencil to get in there and darken that off. And then we want to put the shine in the eye, and that will be the final touch. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I'm actually going to use a pastel to do it. I could try a pencil, but I don't know if it'll stick. Let's see. Sometimes the pencils are not soft or bright enough. No, that'll work. So I kind of push on it and don't let it get too big. So there's my shine in my eye. Otherwise, you could use a pastel. So again, you just want a short stick. Just find an edge and literally just touch it on and then lift off. Because if you keep rubbing it and pushing it around, it's just going to turn to mud. And then I'm going to tip off my dust. And I can see my shine's a bit too big. It's a bit funny, so I'll use my black pencil just to push it in a little bit around there. And there he is, Rooster. Rooster's a boy, yeah. There he is. So I'm going to give you a couple more minutes and then we'll do show and tell. Go back to the other screen and see how everybody went. Fantastico. Take a photo while I'm here. If anyone's got questions or comments or anything, don't be afraid to speak up.